My name is Heather House, and this is my final assignment for EDL 695-802, Curriculum and Critical Consciousness with Dr. D. Our final question is, what would it mean for you to embody a curriculum that privileges critical consciousness? I will answer this question through the use of several smaller questions to consider, but first I want to say that I learned so much about who I am and why I operate the way that I do by reading the chapters by Dr. Johnson in Privilege, Power, and Difference. After creating my own diversity wheel and seeing how I was both privileged and oppressed in different areas, I was able to see why I viewed the world as I did and how my lived experiences influence who I am today. The first question, what shifts would need to take place at the individual, teacher, student, and district level, and what would this entail? For individuals, building a trusting relationship with others, using open communication, and interacting with them as equals, as well as knowing our biases and putting them to rest for the betterment of all, is what it would take to move towards embodying a curriculum that privileges critical consciousness. For a teacher to embody a curriculum that privileges critical consciousness, he or she would have to build a culture in the classroom, become a facilitator for learning rather than a dictator, recognize their need to grow continuously and be a lifelong learner, provide students the opportunity to use their lived experiences in their learning process. In the article titled Curriculum Issues and Debates, the authors began by suggesting that curriculum should include student experiences in school, at home, in the community, and through the media. In addition, teachers would have to relinquish control of their classroom and build a community of learners in their classroom where the rules and expectations are developed together. Several quotes came to mind when I'm thinking about teachers. One is displayed now, but another one is talking about the Bacon method. Worse yet, it turns them into containers, into receptacles to be filled by the teachers. The more completely she fills the receptacles, the better a teacher she is. The more meekly the receptacles permit themselves to be filled, the better students they are. And this resonates with me because I see a teacher filling a container to get a score on a test instead of allowing the students to fill their own containers. In addition, in the TED Talk Consciousness Gap, Andrew states that students should be co-teachers in the classroom, being fully responsible for their education and empowering them, in which the Bacon method doesn't offer. A district that embodies a curriculum that privileges critical consciousness would have to reflect on previous practices and realize what is working well and what needs to be changed. Being open to these changes is needed. They would have to level the top-down demands and allow teacher autonomy in their classrooms while offering them the tools they need to be successful. Districts would have to strip themselves of mandated curriculums, course objectives, and curriculum guides, and educate the administrators and teachers in their buildings on how to reach the needs of all students, exactly where the students are, and provide them with an equal education. Continued education would be key. Another quote that resonates with me because it says that, to me it says, authority with freedom is what transforms society, not in isolation. Ultimately, our job as educators is to build our critical consciousness and help students build their critical consciousness. But as Freire reminds us, oppressed people are the only ones who are able to liberate themselves. So in this sense, we as educators don't liberate students, rather they liberate themselves. This leads me to our next question. How might your positionality affect this work? What might cause discomfort, and how would you engage in this discomfort in a productive way? As a middle-aged white female working in primarily low-income schools with a very high population of non-white students, I have to be very careful with my positionality. Being an instructional coach that is not a part of their school or district, many teachers believe that I'm a superior looking to come change everything they've started or been taught. So before I ever enter the classroom, I begin to build trust with teachers with a letter, phone call, email, or some form of communication to let them know who I am and that I'm not evaluative, nor am I superior, but that I'm a partner or a form of support for anything they need. The first time I walk in their classroom, it's always very uncomfortable because I usually don't know the teacher or any of the students, and I have to prove myself to be loyal and trustworthy to be able to do anything productive in their classroom. It's very hard to help teachers change the culture of their classroom, improve their pedagogy, and define their curriculum without doing it for them. At times it seems so much easier to just go in the classroom and start changing things that we all know will work as former teachers and administrators. However, just as Freire states, they have to do it on their own, or I'm simply putting a Band-Aid on a larger problem. He also states that loving oppressed people means working with them instead of for them. The third question, what dispositions will teachers, leaders, and students need to sustain a critically conscious way of being, teaching, and learning? When looking at different dispositions that teachers and leaders must possess, I came across a list of dispositions for future teachers and educational professionals created by Michael Eisner of the Education Department at California State University. As I looked through the list with critical consciousness in the forefront of my mind, there were many that fit the bill for teachers, leaders, and even students to sustain a critically conscious way of being, teaching, and learning. Among the list includes displaying perseverance, exhibiting self-control, showing maturity and judgment, working well with others and communicating respectfully, reflecting on and evaluating strengths and areas for improvement, demonstrating cultural respect and understanding, displaying sensitivity to ethnically, linguistically, cognitively, physically, socially diverse groups and individuals, treating all people equal, is honest and trustworthy, uses sound, informed judgment, and displays ethical behavior. There were a few that I felt like specifically targeted teachers. Those include demonstrating warmth and advocacy for children, establishing rapport with others, demonstrating respectful appreciation for diverse perspectives, believing in equal education or vocational opportunity, and advocating high and appropriate expectations for all students. After looking at that list, I looked at Freire's indispensable qualities, and he states that one must have to extend the teacher's critical and emotional capacity to be a progressive teacher. He lists humility, courage, tolerance, decisiveness, security, the tension between patience and impatience, and the joy of living. And our final question, are there holes in this work? And if so, what are they and what can we do? If not, what pushback might you expect in reframing curriculum this way? How would you work to overcome this? And yes, I think there is. There are holes in the work because not all people are open to change, can put aside their bias and positionality and work towards embodying a curriculum that privileges critical consciousness. We have national and state mandates that are pushed from the top down that keep those in district schools and classrooms from teaching students where they are and how they learn best. As an instructional coach in multiple districts and many schools and classrooms, I can start there by educating teachers to teach in the cracks of the curriculum and understand the needs of each student walking into their classroom so they can meet them where they are. An educator that can get to know their students, listen to their life experiences, and bring their experiences into their everyday education, despite what's being handed down from the top, is well on their way to being critically conscious. In closing, I'm going to share a few of my personal stories that have come to mind throughout this journey and have allowed me to grow my critical consciousness. It has also made me rethink curriculum and pedagogy with critical consciousness and will change the way I work with my teachers in the future. First, my daughter Emma, who is getting ready to enter 3rd grade, has had an excellent experience in school, starting when she was 3 in junior pre-K, being that she is a privileged student in most ways until she reached 1st grade. She has had severe anxiety since infancy and cried her way into class and sometimes throughout class until 2nd grade. The teachers before 1st grade got to know Emma, knew what made her tick, and handled her beautifully. However, her 1st grade experience was much different. Her teacher, who would be going on maternity leave the 4th day of school, was great the first 4 days. The long-term substitute loved on Emma and even got her to the point where she would walk into school and her classroom alone without tears, simply by loving her each day. And the picture here is her long-term sub before she left, with a quote from Fourier, "Because love is an act of courage, not of fear. Love is commitment to others. No matter where the oppressed are found, the act of love is commitment to their cause, the cause of liberation. And this commitment, because it's loving, is dialogical." However, the teacher came back, and everything changed. Emma, oppressed because of her disability with anxiety, and beginning to realize that her family was very different than the family of her friends, began to cry herself to sleep, thinking about school the following day, made herself sick in the mornings, would have to be escorted to her classroom daily, and cried most of the day. This escalated as her teacher made the comment, "If you don't stop crying, you're going to have to go in a special class." As Garreau states, these students have become disposable with nobody investing in them. There is much more to the story, but to make a long story short, Emma made it through the year, and this teacher made her way to a high-class private school where oppression was likely non-existent. She was not tolerable of those that she deemed less than her, and didn't reflect on her own actions as a trigger for Emma's anxiety. The same year, Emma started dancing. Being new to a competitive dance studio, Sandy and I were slow to allow the dance instructors and other parents to know that Emma had 2 mommies. However, near the end of Emma's 1st year, Emma had found a love for dance, and her instructors had seen the passion and natural talent that she had and asked to meet with me. Sandy and I both went to the meeting, and her teacher and owner of the studio welcomed us with open arms, and she asked us to allow Emma to be in a company and compete on a larger scale the following year. Over time, we began to see Heather, the owner of the studio, to change Mom and Dad on the registration forms to parents, and her traditional father-daughter dance was now called the Favorite Guy dance. We had found a place where there was a teacher that was critically conscious, and everybody in the studio excelled, especially our Emma, who was no longer felt less than, and was able to learn equally with the other girls and boys. As she continued dance and began 2nd grade, Sandy and I met with her teacher prior to open house and explained her anxiety and told her that Emma had 2 mommies. Again, Emma was welcomed with open arms. The teacher even asked to meet with Emma a few times before the year began so she could learn Emma and what she would work for and how to interact with her. Needless to say, Emma got the Terrific Kid Award at the first awards assembly, grew 8 levels in reading, didn't miss a day of school, and had the best year of her life, not wanting school to end for the summer. She never shed a tear, even one day. Miss Everett used Emma's lived experience to meet her where she was and allowed her to liberate herself, knowing that it was okay to be her own person. She taught through the use of the students' experiences in her classroom and allowed the autonomy to make their own decisions and pave their own path. Unfortunately, Miss Everett retired this year, and others will not be afforded the opportunity to sit in this particular classroom, but I'm so glad that our girl was part of her last class. After living these experiences and having this course this summer, I can clearly see the difference in a teacher that is critically conscious and one that allows bias, lacks reflection, and allows the social pressures of the world to cloud her thinking. I have learned from these teachers in my own daughter's life, and how I can now better serve my teachers from this day forward. Thank you.